Imagine going to prison at the age of 16 and being sentenced to 23 years. For me, my life was practically over. I was gonna become a man in prison. Imagine standing in a position where you're going to lose your life and a guy says to you that the reason why we're not going to kill you is because you taught me to read and write. I joined the gangs when I was 12 years old, got my firearm when I was 16 years old, and I started, embracing the culture of this is what my life is going to be. I'm going to be a gangster. I'll end up dead or I'll end up in prison. Crime was seen as a means of being a man. I was starting to become more violent, becoming more brutal, more ruthless in a way. I started to give myself completely to the gangs, but I didn't have really many choices or many options as a young boy. In my community where I was coming from, education wasn't seen as a weapon of release. It was seen as an influence of the white man, as a way of breaking you to become what they want you to become. Black people go to the bush to be men. White boys go to the army to be men. We coloreds go to prison to be men. Education became more of a fear instead of something that you want to freely embrace. What I didn't love about school was coming back home wearing that blazer. I mean, the boys in my community would tease me. I was at Spesbona High School and I was a straight A student, so I was quite good with school. It was kind of like a weird thing, There's this boy in the week, he wears a blazer, he's a top student. I was arrested for armed robbery, extortion, attempted murder, and because I was stupid, I thought that maybe the judge would give me like a warning because I was a first offender. And the men that were with me, they all asked that because you're the youngest, why don't you just take this case and say to the judge, you don't know us and this is all you, And I was naive and stupid enough to agree to that. The reality of having to go to prison sunk in when I was sent to Paulsmoor prison, which was one of the 5 most dangerous prisons in the world. First thing that happened to me, there was a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety. People were being stabbed, people were being killed, people were being raped. And I had this fear of asking myself that if I were to be in this place for such a long time, what are my options going to be? And this guy came to me and he says, you know what, you should join the 28s. And so I asked him, what would the requirements be of becoming a 28? He says, all you have to do is you have to stab a correctional officer. And when you stab a correctional officer, you get your first star and men will start to respect you because they will see that you have pluck, you have stamina, you have guts to do that. And stupidly enough, I was called in and they gave me a knife and they said that the next morning during lunch, when we're all going out into the courtyard, we'll point out the correctional officer that you need to stab, and when you have stabbed him, that is when you're going to get your mark of becoming a 28 gang member. Interestingly enough is that there was this one correctional officer that I started to get to know in prison. He used to come to me, bring me sugar, bring me milk. He used to talk to me about not becoming part of the 28. He used to say to me, just keep clear of these men, focus on your on your sentence, rehabilitation and all of that stuff, And the next morning when I was called and given my knife, they gave me a death blade. Because there's 3 knives that you get. You get a death blade, a short blade, and just a blade to draw blood. But when they give you a death blade, that's when you have to kill the correctional officer. I went into the courtyard and this guy said to me, that's the man we want you to stab. And it was the exact same correctional officer that used to come to me every single day. We had this bond and I had to now stab this guy. When I went out into the courtyard, 2 men accompanied me. And these 2 men have 2 objectives. The first one is that if I don't stab this correctional officer, they need to stab me. And if I do stab this correctional officer, they will have to take the knife so that there's no evidence that I had actually a hand in his death. And so I went up to this correctional officer and he embraced me because he didn't think anything would happen. and I stabbed him. And as I stabbed him and he fell to the floor, a part of me wanted to help him. A part of me felt like I needed to help him, but I couldn't, because I realized that if I would help this guy, that they would stab me, and I wanted to survive this place. I just became a 28 gang member, and correctional officers came, they took me to solitary confinement. I was there for 4 weeks in a dark hole, you know, no visits. And I sat there with my own thoughts, and there were no lights in there, so I was in complete darkness. And I had a lot of time to think about what the rest of my life is going to be like and the type of person I'm going to become. And for me, it was at that moment that I just gave myself over to darkness. I just said, you know what, if this is my life, then so be it. I remember the day when I was released from solitary confinement and I got back into population, to the other prisoners. They were all shouting, screaming, praising me for what I had done. I was like heralded as a hero. A man just lost his life, and here men were celebrating my make as a 28 gang member. The cost of life in prison had no value. Is that death was a reward, you know, and there was no future beyond that. So yeah, I went on. At the age of 21, I got my second star. At the age of 24, I got 3 stars on both my shoulders. And by the age of 25, I had 4 stars on both my shoulders, and I became the first youngest 28 general. And I don't know how I felt. A part of me was happy that I was able to actually overcome the challenges that prison had offered. That the fact that I had made it this far to become a general and to become a man that would have 2,500 men worshipping me. A part of me felt good because I had all of that power now, and I could do whatever I wanted to do. I could command whatever I wanted to command. But you know, after 7 years of being a general in prison, being sent from Helderstrom to Drakenstein, from Drakenstein to Polsmoor, I asked myself a question when I was sitting in the courtyard, and these men were sitting there and they were talking about what they did outside. You know, this other man said, you know, I stabbed her, I raped her, and they would laugh about what they did. There was no remorse in their tone. They were like they were enjoying this kind of life. And the question that came to me is that if I were to be a father one day, what kind of father am I going to be? What if my daughter brings back a guy and he says, Dad, this is my boyfriend, and the guy walks like me, talks like me? Because I realized that my daughter would bring back a guy that looks like me, because daughters normally bring back a man that assimilates their father. And I said, that's not what I want for my child. That's not what I want for myself. And I realized that if I were to continue being this gangster, I would literally die. And if my daughter were to be asked, what kind of father was your father? What would she say? My pa was a gangster. So for me, it's like, that's what people will remember, you know. But will they remember a general of the 28s? Will they remember a man that took other people's lives, a man that hurt people, that killed people, that ordered people to die? That they won't. I would not leave a living legacy. And would my daughter be proud to have a father like that? No, I don't think my daughter would be proud. I don't even think my son would want to be the man that I am. And so for me, I had to make a real change. And 7 years later, I decided to leave the gangs. It was a difficult decision. And I said to the head of prison that I want to leave. I don't want to be a general of the 28s anymore. The head of prison said to me, Welcome, you do realize that you might die because of this decision? I said, yes, I do. So obviously they need to get 4 other generals from 4 other prisons to come and do a hearing. And when these 4 generals sit and they hear my story as to the reason why I want to leave, they then have to approve or disapprove. And if they disapprove, they would have to kill me. I was a very good general, I think, because, I mean, I used to make 500,000 rand a month in prison. My turnovers were amazing. I had my hand in everything, in prostitution, in drug trafficking, in solicitation of information. you know, I had the prison running like a well-oiled machine. And at the end of the day, when I used to sit there and money used to come in, I used to have all of the stacks of money on my bed, and I used to say to my colonels, just make sure that they're all stacked properly so that when the people come to pick the money up, that everything is okay. And it was like 500,000 Rand every single month with no fail. I was a good businessman. You know, I regarded myself as a good businessman. I had my finger on the pulse. And one of the generals asked me, Welcome, do you really want to leave this behind? Do you really want to stop being this man? What are you going to do when you stop? When you're no longer part of the numbers gang? What are you going to do? I'm gonna continue, you know, teaching offenders to read and write. I'm gonna continue trying to build a positive lifestyle, you know. I know it's going to be difficult, but I'm going to try. And so he says, based on what you're saying, I don't know, we'll have to decide on this. And these 4 guys stood there, and the one guy said to me, Welcome, as we're going to make this decision whether you're going to live or die, let me ask you something. Do you remember the time 6 years ago when I couldn't read or write, that you taught me to read and write? You know? And I couldn't remember teaching this general to read and write, but he could remember. And he said, but you taught me to read and write. And the other one said to me that I couldn't even read the letter that my girlfriend sent me. And then you taught me how to read it. I mean, I can read today because of you. And I think that maybe we should just let you go. They didn't kill me that day. They didn't kill me not because I was ruthless or because I was a heartless general. They let me live that day because I taught a guy to read and write. Like, imagine standing in a position where you're going to lose your life, and a guy says to you that the reason why we're not going to kill you is because you taught me to read and write. And I just really remember those words that Nelson Mandela spoke about, saying that education is a weapon. And for me, it was like, it just released me from the numbers gang. Just the fact that I could teach this guy to read and write was like, it's okay, you can go. And that is why education has always been such an important part of my life. So I left the number and I started an ABET education school in prison. So wrote requests, spoke to the heads of prisons and says, I want to start a school. You know, I want to teach offenders to read, I want to teach them to write, I want to teach them numeracy, I want to do that. And they said, okay, cool, no problem. I got a guy to, you know, they gave me a bursary to study at UNISA. I did ABET, Adult Basic Education and Training, got that done. So now I was a qualified teacher and I was teaching. And I'm really happy that Henley has given me this opportunity to shine. And yes, look at my English, that I never spoke English like this. You know, I used to like Sabella, like Aweme Masakan to Laikala. I used to be quite raw. It's like I've never spoken English like this, like bourgeois, right? But Henley hasn't just improved the way I speak English. Henley has improved the way I see conversations, the way I meet people. I'm reminded of the integrity that I've built while being at Henley. I remember we were going through a very difficult time in the foundation. Just a quick share. So we were going through a difficult time, and a friend of mine called me and said, Welcome, I saw on your post that you're struggling, you need some cash. I've got 30,000 Rand, I'm sending it to you right now, are you good? I said, brother, I know the world that you are in, I know that you are part of the underworld, I do not want your money, you know, because I know that if I'm going to take your money, there's a consequence to that. Henley has taught me that there are consequences to decisions that we make. You know, that if I take this guy's money right now, he's going to knock on my door and say, listen, I need your help. And I'm not going to be able to refuse him because he helped me out. Like, if you do this, what is it? Well, how would you impact the work that you've done thus far? You know, and what kind of man do you want to be known as? Because you need to be a man of integrity. So for me, it's like when friends of mine that come from the gang environment or that are still in the gangs ask me out for lunch or ask me out for supper, I always say no. The reason why is because I don't want to be guilty by association. I've made up my mind that I no longer want to be a part of crime, that I don't want to live a life of crime. Henley Business School has offered me a type of education that doesn't demand me to take anything from somebody else, but it allows me to give, it allows me to share, it allows me to network, it allows me to build communities. It allows me that I've taken so much from communities, but now I have an opportunity through this program to give back to the community, to build the community positively by not taking, but by giving my time, giving my energy, giving my skills, planting new seeds of hope within a community where kids that come from the same background where I come from have an opportunity to become better, to make better decisions, to make better choices. We had this session yesterday, and when they said, "You are done, guys, congratulations, you successfully submitted your ALP," the panel was like, wowed. I was like, whew. And interestingly enough, my ALP was based on my foundation, Bright Spark. And interestingly enough, I was a student, and as well sitting in a position where I could actually investigate and scrutinize my own foundation as an outsider. It was amazing. And I could see where we were not actually, we weren't meeting certain requirements. And my team was amazing because they really helped me see so many things about the foundation. When Henley talks about building businesses in Africa, it's actually true. So for me, I do feel that I want to be the embodiment of that. I want to live that. And doing my ACMP was that. Now doing my ADMP is that. Doing my PG DIP will become that. Being my MBA will become that very principle of that I no longer have to take from other people, but I can now give. And the prison has 3 gangs, 26s, 27s, 28s. We know them as 6, 7s, and 8s. And Henley has the same to offer. Henley has offered me an NQF level 6. I'm doing my NQF level 7, and then I'm going to do my NQF level 8. So it's a positive number. And no longer have to look at the negative number, but at the positive number. So now I'm able to give back instead of taking. That's my story.